Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. Just over 2 hours ago, Narendra Modi was sworn in as the 15th Prime Minister of India. It was a grand ceremony in the forecourt of Rashtrapati Bhavan with 6 SARC heads and perhaps a total of 4,000 guests. Also sworn in with Mr. Modi were 23 cabinet ministers, 10 ministers of state with independent charge and 11 simple ministers of state. With a total of 45, this is a far smaller government than Dr. Manmohan Singh's 77. Over the next 1 hour, with a special panel of guests, we shall discuss and debate Prime Minister Modi's government, analyse its strengths, as well as point out some of its possible weaknesses. And now joining me to talk about the incoming Modi government is the chairman of the Hindu group, N. Ram, the editorial director and chairperson of the Hindustan Times, Shobna Bhartiya, former Foreign Secretary Lalit Mansingh, the chairman of Max India and Vodafone India, Analjit Singh, and also joining us soon, Congress MP and spokesperson Abhishek Singhvi, Shiromani Akali Dal MP Naresh Gujral, and senior BJP leader Sudhanshu Mittal. Shobna Bhartiya, let me start with a simple question. As you look at the collection of ministers who've taken oath, and we'll come to their portfolios in a moment's time, does this collection have the stamp of Narendra Modi? And if it does, what would you identify as its chief hallmark?
I definitely think that the composition seems to have the stamp of Narendra Modi. If you recall, Karan, he spoke about having a small government and having large governance. Narendra Modi has actually returned a record number of BJP MPs. The easier thing and the pressure on him would have been to have accommodated so many people, have the normal size Council of Ministers. The outgoing Council of Ministers, I think, was 76. Instead of that, true to Modi's style, he's got a very compact Council of Ministers, very few hand-picked people. The discourse this time around isn't so much on regional balances, on caste, on gender, even though he's given a sizable number of women portfolios, but it looks like he's picked people who he feels can deliver. He's won this election on the basis of hope, and that was his entire agenda throughout the elections, and he knows he has to deliver. He knows the expectations from him are high. So I think he seems to have handpicked his team. He's collapsed many portfolios. He's given people additional charge. He's combined things. There's been vertical and horizontal integration. So I definitely think it bears the stamp of Modi, the chief minister. We have no other way of knowing what he stands for. But looking at the way in which he governed Gujarat, where he was very hands-on with a small team, eye on the ball, delivering, I think he's picked his team and he's reduced it to a commendable size.
And Ram, the cabinet that was sworn in is 23, 10 ministers of state with independent charge, another 11 simple ministers of state. That's a total of 45. But clearly some people have additional charges which are going to have to be handed over to other people in due course, like for instance Arun Jaitley, who's got 2 major ministries with him. And then it's already being said that there'll be an expansion in some 4 weeks' time when more ministries are given to the allies. So do you see this claim of a small government getting eroded with time as Mr. Modi has to expand to hand away additional charges and maybe as allies put pressure to get more jobs for themselves?
Yes, that is certainly being diluted. It isn't that small. And also, Karan, there are some odd pairings. Apart from finance and defense, they should have surely chosen somebody suitable for defense to start with, instead of vesting it temporarily with the finance minister, who also has corporate affairs apparently. And then environment is oddly paired with something else. We don't have the official list yet, but it's very odd. It's a devaluation of a very important portfolio, perhaps under pressure from some of the people who have the corporate interests which have objected to the delays. Of course, the environmental process has not been clean, but with somebody like Jairam Ramesh, I think it's getting more transparent. And it's unfortunate that that has been sidelined.
Okay.
These odd pairings aside, there is some strength at the core. Sushma Swaraj, External Affairs, Arun Jaitley, the Home Minister, and so on. There's some experience and strength there, but Smriti Irani for HRD is a very odd choice. Hell of a risk to take for somebody who's untried.
Let's come to the individuals chosen and paired with portfolios in a moment's time, because I think we may want to talk about each of these individually rather than just talk about them collectively as an odd choice. Analjit Singh, I noticed that, for instance, two critical ministries, finance and defense, have been handed over to Arun Jaitley. Now, at a time when the economy faces particular problems and needs a real push from this government, are you a bit concerned that the finance minister has got another major portfolio and he therefore may not be able to devote himself full-time to finance?
No, Karan. I think the important thing is the tone at the top. The important thing is the leadership. We have enough firepower and bench strength available to handle tactical issues and give advice, but the strength in the political leadership and the alignment and the tone at the top is what I think will make things happen finally.
Are you worried that a ministry like defense doesn't have a full-time defense minister? And if it doesn't, does it not suggest that there's a critical lack of talent in the BJP? Because normally, when a prime minister appoints a cabinet, he has in mind the top 4 positions. Here, one of the key top 4 has had to be given as additional charge to the finance minister. So, does it raise worrying question marks about the bench strength?
I think this is a big disappointment. If you look at the manifesto, there are two clear segments: security and economy. Now, you have given security and economy to one particular minister. I don't think he's going to receive his attention full time.
One or other will suffer.
Quite. The other is, we were told that there will be clustering of ministries, which would have made sense. That is apparently not done. But finally, you know...
At least, I should add, it's not apparent. We're going at the moment with the speculation that TV has taken as the rule for the day. It's possible that when the formal portfolio is announced, we may have a different picture.
Possible, but you have at least 30-odd ministers with independent charge, cabinet and minister of state. But what we should remember is, how did Modi run Gujarat? He didn't run it through his cabinet. He ran it through trusted top bureaucrats in the system. Which
suggests the PMO is going to be more important than any minister.
So no matter who is a minister, I think Modi is the minister in charge.
That too is a subject I'll come to, because the nature of the clubbing, if clubbing has happened, is not apparent. How important the PMO will be and whether that will end up dwarfing individual ministers is something that's worth exploring. But I want to come back, Shobna Bhartiya, to this question of Arun Jaitley having two critical portfolios. It's not just that finance is at a particularly demanding point where Arun Jaitley's entire attention is needed, but defense, after 8 years of Antony, has serious procurement problems. The Army, the Navy, the Air Force believe that critical equipment that they need has been delayed and unconscionably delayed. Won't both ministries suffer if one man has to split himself in two to take care of both of them?
I don't think so. I think he has handpicked the person who he feels A, understands and has some alignment in the sort of vision that he has. B, in defense, I agree with you that it needs to be spurred, and they want to bring in indigenization, they want to encourage the private sector to get in, and I think somewhere there would be a correlation. Besides, the 3 chiefs also play a very important part in defense, as we know. And Modi's entire focus has been to also bring in the best minds and to bring in professionals. Jaitley too has shown in his last ministry that he does rely a lot on professionals. If they actually do that, empower the bureaucrats, which they haven't always necessarily been done, and do bring in expertise from external expertise, I don't think that he can't manage both. In fact, I think the fact that he has given Arun Jaitley both defense and finance goes to show that he has the confidence. He understands that defense is extremely important for us to kickstart the economy. But by giving it to a person who is his handpicked person, he wants to ensure that it goes down the direction in which he's chosen. He can't afford at this moment not to get the results that he's envisaged.
We're joined at this moment by Sudhanshu Mittal, a senior leader of the BJP. Mr. Mittal, we're talking about the fact that 2 critical ministries, defense and finance, have been given to Arun Jaitley. Shobna Bhartiya has defended that decision on the grounds that Mr. Jaitley is someone who not only has the Prime Minister's confidence, but is an extremely capable minister who can handle 2 major portfolios, both of which, I put it to you, are very demanding at the moment. But does it not suggest to the outside world, as Lalit Mansingh was saying a moment ago, that you actually have a dearth of talent? Normally, prime ministers clearly have in mind the top 4 portfolios. Defense is one of those, and yet you weren't able to find a defense minister.
I think you're reading too much into this in terms of a negativity. Look, it is indisputable that Mr. Jaitley is one of the most competent political entities around. Besides being a lawyer, his grasp of politics as well as administration is phenomenal. This we have seen in his role as a leader of the opposition in Rajya Sabha. So there's no dearth of talent. If you look at the profile of all the ministers who have been sworn in, I mean, professionals, competent, young, energetic, all doers, achievers. You know, you have such a fantastic mix of people in this cabinet.
Let's take as read. Let's try and concentrate on individuals. I take your word for it that you have a fantastic mix.
Right.
At this moment, I should also announce to the audience that all ministers have been called by Mr. Modi to Gujarat Bhavan. There is a special meeting that is being held with his new ministers. I take it that they will then go back to Rashtrapati Bhavan in time for the banquet that President Mukherjee is hosting later this evening. Enram, let's move to the second critical minister out of the top four, Sushma Swaraj. Now, it was well known that she was insisting on one of the top four portfolios. Initially, it was thought that, in fact, Mr. Modi was reluctant to give her one of those top four. She's got MEA in the end. What do you make of her appointment as the new External Affairs Minister? And I'm going to ask you that first, and then put the same question to Mr. Man Singh.
I think she's a good choice. She's known for her sobriety and so on, and she's sophisticated, she's urbane, and I think given her position in the party, her experience, which puts her ahead of several of the others, I think it's a good choice. And she'll present the best possible face to the external world, one hopes.
Now, she's been given, if the press speculation is correct, as MOS, the former army chief, who also has, in addition to being MOS External Affairs, an independent charge as Minister for the Northeast. Do you believe a former army chief, from your experience, translates into a good MOS External Affairs, where a lot of the time you actually have to just be polite and kind and full of protocol?
Well, I think there's going to be a problem, and to me it looks like a pretty clumsy arrangement to have a minister like Sushma Swaraj and an MOS like an ex-army chief. Sushma Swaraj is incidentally a very good choice. I think she has experience, she is articulate, she has been on numerous missions abroad with Mr. Vajpayee and separately, so it's a good choice. But she needs a good assistance.
And you don't think General V.K. Singh is the right MOS?
I think General V.K. Singh has a lot of skills which could be utilized elsewhere.
But protocol is not one of them?
Protocol is really not one of them.
Now, I noticed as I look at the ministry, Shobna Bhartiya, that many of Sushma Swaraj's colleagues don't seem to have got places in this ministry. People like Mr. Ahluwalia, people like Mr. Rudy have been left out. No doubt there are other things in mind. But has Sushma, after achieving what she wanted, one of the top four, found that she's a bit isolated in this government?
Possibly, Karan. That is the sort of interpretation that is being given, because it's also quite known that Sushma was reluctant. She wasn't fully backing Modi. She seemed to be sulking. She wanted to be on Raisina Hill. According to sources, she was offered HRD or some other portfolio earlier. I believe she was not fully happy with that. So Sushma has been accommodated, because I'm sure BJP would not want fishers to begin with. But having said that, her ability to actually push for her candidates, obviously I think somewhere gets limited, because if she herself has barely got what she wanted, and perhaps she wanted more. So the ability to push for her people obviously seems to be something that's not visible at all in this setup.
And this is another sense in which this cabinet and this government has Mr. Modi's hallmark on it. Those who were dissenters, those who were reluctant to accept him, have been marginalized.
Yeah, he's got his team there. He's got people who were with him. He's got people who he has faith on. And he knows that these are the people who are going to deliver.
So there are
that mark is very, very clear.
And there are no lurking challenges in this government that he needs to worry about?
None at all. By having the 75 cut-off age, by not having, dynasty, he's removed Murli Manohar Joshi. Mr. Advani in any case was far too senior. So he's really got a hand-picked team there.
Anurjit Singh, in terms of the conversation we're having, do you believe that this particular PMO will be one of the most powerful that we've had for a long time, and that at the end of the day, individual ministers, no matter how talented and no matter how important the portfolio they have, will all be very closely supervised and sometimes even directed by the PMO? And the PMO, by the way, is now, it's officially known, headed by Nripaindra Mishra. He will be the principal secretary. What can you tell me about him? He's a former head of TRAI. He's a former secretary of the Department of Telecommunication. I imagine from your telecommunication connection, this must be a man you know quite well. What can you tell us about him?
Well, clearly, I think we're going to see a a PMO which is very effective as a PMO should be. I also want to go back to the earlier discussion about Mr. Jaitley getting defense and finance. You could see it exactly the other way. I think there is an agenda, there is a program, a plan there. And there is no doubt that Mr. Modi believes in execution and a flat organization, and I think he's going to see that interface happen through the PMO.
Okay, I saw your finger going up, Mr. Mittal. You wanted to say something at that point? Go right ahead.
While we were discussing Sushma Swaraj, I just want to draw one attention. She is one who's practiced bipartisan polity when it comes to external affairs. You see, when she had represented India in Sri Lanka, the way she articulated India's interest with Rajapaksa ji, it was widely acclaimed across the board. So realizing the importance of bipartisanism, having political consensus in politics in relating to foreign affairs, I think that balance she'll be able to strike. And given her experience of external affairs, where she's met so many head of states, individually, she's been briefed, the way she's articulated India's interests with them, I think India's foreign policy is there for a big leap.
All right, let's come now to the clubbing of ministries. Late last night, Mr. Modi issued a press release from Gujarat Bhavan where he talked about creating clusters of ministry. You were a little skeptical, Ram, a little earlier about the nature of the clubbing of ministries. I noticed, for instance, that agriculture has a separate minister, that is Radha Mohan Singh. Food and supply has a separate minister, that is Ram Vilas Paswan. And then food processing has a third separate minister, that's Harsimrat Kaur. Should not these have been clubbed together to make one sensible cluster, yet it hasn't been done? So how effective and how rational is the clustering that's happening?
Very inconsistently done, and also some very odd pairings. For example, MOS and external affairs and something for Northeast. Environment, I forget what it's clubbed with, something very odd.
Information and broadcasting.
Devaluing environment.
It's clubbed with information and broadcasting, and it's gone to Prakash Javadekar.
So it makes there's no rationality behind this clubbing. It's very odd pairings, and nobody can contend that there's some deep thought behind this. And I can't possibly believe that finance and defense can be in the same hands for too much longer. So I think it's very, so the clubbing hasn't happened, but odd pairings have happened. That's what comes out. So that's quite a disappointment, isn't it?
Well, I'll take your word that it is a disappointment. I don't want to express my opinion. That would be wrong for me to do. But I certainly note that you think it's disappointing. Let me put another potential disappointment to you. In their speeches, and perhaps in Mr. Modi's speech in particular, he talked about how foreign policy needs to be driven by foreign trade. And one had been led to believe that perhaps external affairs would be clubbed with something like commerce. But they've got two completely separate ministers. You've got Nirmala Sitharaman in charge of commerce, and you've got Sushma Swaraj in charge of foreign affairs. And as far as I know, they may not even necessarily be the best of friends. So is that a clubbing that should have happened, which hasn't happened?
Well, rationally it should have happened, but it's a difficult clubbing. You know, there are two separate ministries with their own work, ethics and culture, and with two different systems. The Foreign Service and the IAS haven't worked together really. So I think that's in the long term. But I would say, judging by the discussions that we've heard, it's going to be a two-tier government. The cabinet is there. There's a political balance in the cabinet. But the two tiers will represent one set of super ministers who will have greater confidence of Mr. Modi and who will have generally supervisory powers of the other departments. I think Arun Jaitley is emerging as one of these super ministers.
Naresh Gujral of the Shiromani Akali Dal joins us. Welcome to the program, Naresh Gujral. Naresh Gujral, we are talking about the clustering of ministries and how as a result you've got a few super ministers emerging. We've already talked about Arun Jaitley, who has two enormous ministries under his charge, defense and finance. I want to come now to Nitin Gadkari, which perhaps is the most obvious clustering that I can see. And we're at the moment still going by what the speculation has been on TV all day, not by any official announcement. Mr. Gadkari has surface transport and shipping. Now, are these not two rather large ministries that require a lot of time on their own individually? And will Mr. Gadkari be terribly stressed when he has to combine both? Will he have time to handle it?
Well, Karan, I think they will give a lot of powers to the ministers of state who will work under Mr. Gadkari. And in a way, it's a good way to nurture talent. Because you would see that the youngsters who have been taken in need mentoring. And under Mr. Gadkari and Mr. Jaitley, I'm sure they would perform, and there would be a senior keeping an eye on them.
Can I interrupt? You're saying something very interesting, because the implication of what you're saying is that the real reason for this clustering is because youngsters need mentoring, and therefore that suggests that you don't have adequate talent to be able to give the ministries as you would like. Clustering, therefore, was not an attempt at rationalization so much as a response to the fact that you're short of talent. That's the hint in what you're saying.
Well, the fact of the matter is that almost 70% of the members of parliament in the Lok Sabha are newcomers. So obviously they don't have enough experience. Talent they may have, but they lack experience. And it's good that they gather experience under a mature minister.
Naresh Gujral's explanation is profoundly honest, Shobna Bhartia, because it actually contradicts the message Mr. Modi sent out last night. Mr. Modi last night was making a great virtue of clustering, of rationalization, of reducing the number of ministries because he wanted to maximize governance and to minimize government. But what you're hearing from Naresh Gujral, a close ally, is that actually the reason is to do with the fact that the youngsters, and there are a lot of youngsters, are inexperienced, they need mentoring, and so clustering had to happen because the talent is limited. He's sort of turned the logic on its head.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of merit in what he's saying as well, because if you think of very obvious names which have been excluded, we can't really come up with too many. So it's not to say that there's a huge wealth of talent lying outside and they haven't been actually included. So there is merit in what Naresh is saying, because they do have a lot of first-timers. They've never had so many MPs before. So there are a lot of untried and untested elements over there whose admin skills are yet to be proven. So it did seem that the BJP definitely does lack the sort of talent that one has seen in previous governments, only by virtue of the fact that most of them are not experienced. Don't forget, Karan, it was a party that had two not so long ago. So from 2 to 85 to where they are now, they obviously don't have the sort of talent that one is used to seeing in a more Congress-led government formation. So there aren't very obvious people who haven't been taken in. So I think what Naresh is saying is to some extent correct. You can't afford to let people without experience head some of the important ministries. You can't afford to let them drift or for them to slip. So you have no option but to give people so-called additional charges. I don't think these are clubbing together. If they were clubbing together, they would be given to one minister because there was some sort of vertical integration happening, as you see with coal and power, for instance. But you don't see that in many others.
Absolutely.
Yeah, defense and finance are not clubbing together. It's additional charge, or law and telecom to Ravi Shankar Prasad.
Anurjit Singh, in fact, the truth is clustering or clubbing together is really limited to just a couple of cases. One is Piyush, who's got coal and power. Another is clearly Mr. Gadkari, who's got two sets of transport. Do you think, therefore, that there hasn't been as much clubbing together as there could have been and should have been? What you've got is additional charges, which is a different thing. Has Mr. Modi perhaps overemphasized last night in his press release the logic of clustering and delivered less?
Karan, my point is different. In any organization, and the government is also an organization, 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. And in this entire debate, we're ignoring the machinery, the executives, i.e. the technocrats and the bureaucrats who are going to be an integral part of government. So if the tone at the top and 3 or 4 solid ministers can drive the government's agenda, I don't think it matters that much about who the personalities are, what the clustering is, and so on and so forth. So the top is heavy, the top is strong, the top has a vision, the top is clear, and I think that's what's going to drive the agenda through very capable bureaucrats that we have in the country.
You know, Naresh Gujral, you were very upfront and honest when you said that one of the problems was the inexperience as well as the lack of depth of talent amongst the new young people that the BJP has MPs. Does this suggest that in the early days this government could face a few bumpy, rocky moments, because when you have inexperienced people and you have to make up for it by clubbing charges or giving additional charges to ministers who clearly will be therefore stressed themselves, you could end up with some very bumpy moments in the first 6 months. Is that a fear in your mind?
Karan, I never said that they lack talent. I said they lack experience. So it's good that they work under a mature and experienced minister. Talent they have. I'm sure with time they will have more experience, they will gather more confidence, and in times to come they can head the ministries even. So there's nothing wrong with that. But as somebody said before me, that the tone, tenor and pace will be set by the Prime Minister. He is the one who's going to determine the agenda of the government. And I think he has proven himself before in Gujarat, and I have no doubt that the pace that he will set will take the country forward.
All right, that's an ideal moment at which to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the new Prime Minister's office. Will it in fact be the real engine of this government? Will it in a sense go back to the powerful PMOs that we've seen when Indira Gandhi was Prime Minister? And in a very real sense, is that going to be the style Mr. Modi adopts? We're going to take a quick break, and then we come back, we're going to continue with this discussion, analysing both strengths as well as the possible potential weaknesses of the government that Mr. Modi swore in this evening, and the portfolios for which are now believed but are still to be officially announced.